So it's good to be together again for another weekend. There's a passage of scripture I want to look at with you today. But before I do, I want to give you just a really quick update. You might have seen this last week. Our elders shot a video relating to coronavirus and our regathering plan as a church. And I just want to draw your attention to that. We've put a new page up on our website, and you'll find it right on our homepage. You can click on it, and it'll give you the latest up-to-date information on our regathering plan for the coming weeks and months. And if you haven't seen the video yet, you can click on that and find that there. The second thing I want to tell you is we want to do a survey with our church family, and we mentioned that again in the video. And just a heads up that's going to be sent your way via email Sunday morning. Or this morning, depending on when you're watching this. Now, if you don't get it, that means we probably don't have your email address. And again, you can go to our homepage, copperhills.org, and on Get Connected tab along the top, you can give us your information, including your email address, and we'll add you to our database and get that sent out to you. It's the best way to stay connected. So, I want to give you that information. All right, so this is Memorial Day weekend, and it's a really interesting weekend in that it really, in one way, is a celebration, two ends of a continuum. On the one end, you have this kind of somber thought of our fellow citizens over the last hundreds of years who have lost their lives fighting for freedom, for our country and for freedom in the world. And if you have a family member that has been lost in those kinds of conflicts, you know that there's a sadness and there's a sorrow to it. There's some mourning and grief that goes with it. But on the other side of the continuum, it seems that this is a weekend of celebrating the start of summer, though this is an entirely unique summer for us, to say the least. But it's a time of barbecues and ATV adventures, hanging out by the pool, and those kinds of things. Really the start of summer, end of school. And as unique as it is this year, that's what it is. So you have these two sides of this continuum of this celebration. So speaking of Memorial Day, I want to ask you to imagine something with me today. Imagine this, that you and your family and a circle of friends decide that you've had enough of the coronavirus, enough of the summer heat that's here way too early again this year, and you decide to go up to the rim up north to get away from the heat and to get away from COVID and just to hang out and celebrate and with friends and with family and friends of friends, and word kind of gets out that this is what you're doing. And lo and behold, what started out as just a few people becomes 100 people that all want to go up to the rim with you to get out of this. And so you make those arrangements, you rent a bunch of Airbnbs and cabins and so on, and there's like 100 people that are going to go up and join you. And of course, you're going to maintain the CDC appropriate distancing and masks and so on, right? Like for sure. And so Friday night rolls around. And everybody heads up there, and you've arranged for this really cool thing for everybody. Nobody has to bring any food because you've hired a caterer to come up and provide food for you for the 3 days. So you get up there at 6:30, 7:30, you're going to have dinner together, but there's no caterer. Caterer hasn't shown up. About 8:30 or so, you get a text message saying, got stuck in Phoenix, stranded, see you in the morning. It's from the caterer. Well, by now everyone's hungry, kids are hungry, and you're not sure exactly what to do. There's no food in the Airbnbs or the cabins. You're like an hour away from the closest services where there's any food for you, grocery store, 7-Eleven, anything like that. So what are you going to do? So you put the word out. Maybe there's somebody in the group that has brought some food with you that didn't know about. And all of a sudden, a little kid comes up, and he's gone through his backpack, and he has found a cracker and a mini Swedish fish. And as silly as it is, that's all there is. And then it happens. Something's about to happen that's going to be what you and your 100 friends talk about for the next decades as they relate Memorial Day 2020. Here's what it is. There's a guy in the crowd that barely anybody knows. They're not sure exactly how he got there, but he comes out and he asks for the little boy to give him the cracker and the Swedish fish, and he starts to break it up and takes out a box cutter and he cuts the fish up, and then he asks for bowls. Bring me some bowls. And he fills the bowls up, fills them up with pieces of cracker and Swedish fish. And lo and behold, as amazing as it is, the bowls are full and there's enough for 100 people to have a meal. I know, okay, it's a ridiculous story, but I promise you this, if it was even close to true, it's what you would remember about the weekend. It's what you might write in the memoirs of your life. I remember Memorial Day of 2020, this group went up north, and you would talk about how this person did what they did. So why do I tell you all that? Well, the story today that we want to look at, the incident that happens that one of Jesus' friends tells us about, his friend John, is a story right along that line. It's really an amazing, amazing story. It has to do with a whole group of people that show up. There's not enough food for everybody. A guy comes along and somehow takes the little bit that's there, makes it enough for everybody. And it's what John remembers. Of all the stories of incidents that John talks about, this is one that he makes sure that he gets down. You know why? Because he was there, he saw it, he can't deny it, he watched what happened. And so he writes it down. But here's the interesting thing with John, once again, as we've learned before. The reason he tells us is not just to tell us that it happened. There's something up for John. He wants to, for sure, let us know that it happened, but he wants more than that. He was so impacted by these incidents, just like this one today, that he says this in John 20:31. He says, "But these were written, I wrote them down, so that you would continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you would have life by the power of his name." You know what he's saying? These things happen, and I want you to know about them, but I don't want you just to know about them because they happen. I want you to know that they impacted what I believed about Jesus. I saw it, I was there, I experienced it. But even more than just believe, I want you to experience what I received as a result of believing in Jesus, trusting him, leaning on him, giving him my life. I found life amazing with him. And it's just unthinkable to me that you would miss out on that life. So I'm telling you these stories. I know they might be hard to believe, but I was there. They really happened because I want you to have the life that I found in Jesus. So what's the story? Well, the story is, John tells us in chapter number 6 of his memoir, beginning in the first verse of that chapter, it starts this way. It says, "After this, Jesus crossed over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias." Here's an image of the Sea of Galilee. It happens all to the north. It's not really much of a trip. It might be 3-4 miles to row across that part of the lake, but this is what happens. So a little bit of context so you can visualize what Jesus and the guys are doing. They're back in the Sea of Galilee area. They've been down to Jerusalem, but they're back there. This is their northern base of operations. And we're told that Jesus gets the guys into a fishing boat and they row across that northern part of that lake. Matthew, who was in the boat with them, in his account of this, also records this story, significant for him. He writes this, he says, "When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the town." So what had happened? Well, it's really a bit of it's really pretty tragic when you think of it. What had happened is that John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, and the guy that introduced Jesus to the whole world, has just been executed by the Herod in that particular region. And just before that, Jesus is rejected and treated like a fool in his own hometown. It's been a rough couple of days for Jesus, and it's like he says to the guys, "Hey guys, just let's get away for a while. Let's go across to kind of a wilderness area on the other side of the sea, and we'll just rest and we'll refresh and we'll think through what has happened, and this is what we'll do." But it all gets turned upside down for Jesus. John tells us that a huge crowd kept following him wherever he went because of what? Why were they following him? Was it because of his profound wisdom? Was it because of his knowledge? Was it because he reminded them of who God was? Was it his great faith? No. Actually, they followed him because of this, John tells us, because they saw his miraculous signs as he healed the sick. In other words, the reason that these people are following Jesus is because they have seen, heard, experienced, been alongside as Jesus has done some amazing, amazing things in people's lives. Or maybe they've heard about it from someone else. But the thinking is, if Jesus could do that for someone else, or I have seen him do it for someone else, I wonder if he would do that for me. I wonder if he might do it for my mom or my dad or my kids or my friend or my wife, my spouse. I wonder if maybe he would do that. Maybe he'll heal someone. And so I'm going to go follow him. I'm going to be close to him because I need something, and I think he might be the answer to that. So John goes on to tell us that Jesus and the guys get to the other side of the far side of the lake, and it says, then Jesus climbed a hill and sat down with his disciples around him. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration. That's the kind of detail that somebody who's actually telling a real story, an eyewitness account, would include. Doesn't seem to be relevant to the story, but it obviously was to John, so he includes it. And then it says, as Jesus saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Of course they were. You see, they're like us. They are. We think Jesus might be able to help us, fix us. He might be able to give us and free us and provide for us and take care of us and give us the things that we need. And that's the wonderful list we come to him with. There's another list, not quite as common, but sometimes we might come to him to say, would you forgive me? Would you correct me? Would you guide me? Would you even convict me of what truth is? But the fact of the matter is they were looking for him because they wanted something from him. They thought he could provide something. As well they should. Because this is what Jesus has invited them, and he's invited us to do, to come to him, to ask him for what we think we need in life. This is a wonderful thing to do. It's a good thing. And if we're wise, that's exactly what we will do, because he's invited, and the scriptures invite us to do it, and this is what these people are doing. And then Jesus surprises one of the guys that are right beside him with what he does next. It says this, he turned to Philip and he asked, hey, Philip, where can we buy bread to feed these people? Jesus and his guys see this horde of people coming toward them, and they remember that they have come there to get away from the crowd, right? Jesus wants to have some time away. And then this crowd shows up. And I just picture this, like Jesus leaning into the first guy to his right, and happens to be Philip, and he says, hey, Philip, how about we go and get some food for all these people? What if we just feed them all? Look after them. To which Philip must have been thinking, I think Jesus just told a joke. I think he's kidding. Maybe looks at Jesus a second time and sees that Jesus is actually serious. And now he goes, like, whoa, just a second. Like, we heal people. We cast demons out of people. We don't feed people. How are we possibly going to do that? We don't have enough money. We don't have resources right here. How are we possibly going to do that? But it says Jesus asked him a question for a reason. It says that he was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. So here when it says he tested Philip, it's not like a pass-fail kind of test. He's not checking to see if Philip has character. And that He's actually, the word would be, he's preparing Philip for something. Because he knows what he's already going to do, he's kind of setting Philip up to go, Philip, there's something about to happen, and when it happens, I don't want you to be like surprised with it. You will be, but I want to prepare you that something amazing is about to happen, and here's what it is. Philip obviously doesn't get it, because he replies to Jesus this way. Look, Jesus, tell you what, even if we worked for months, actually 6 to 8 months would probably be more accurate, because it was 200 in their coinage denarii, which would be about 6 to 8 months. So if we worked for 6 to 8 months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them. This is just an impossibility. This cannot happen. Philip had to be taken aback by this suggestion that Jesus makes. Maybe the first thing that comes to his mind is, how exactly is this going to happen? And then he realizes it can't happen. It's just not possible. He does this quick calculation and realizes there's no way. So this is how Philip replied. He said, even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them. Philip had to be taken back by what it was that Jesus had just suggested. First thing that comes to his mind is we don't have enough. We just don't have enough to do this. And besides, this was Philip's hometown region. He knew the resources that weren't there. There was no Costco. There was no Safeway, Albertsons, or Fry's. There wasn't even a Circle K for them to go get these food resources that Jesus had just promised. I think Jesus was having some fun with Philip. I really do. And unfortunately, Peter's brought his brother along, Andrew, and this is what Andrew steps in with. He says, then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's what happens, I think. I think Andrew goes out in the crowd. He's kind of working the crowd a little bit to see if there's enough inventory of food that people have brought with them. Maybe they can cobble together enough stuff that a few people can be fed. And he finds this little boy, apparently, and brings this little boy over to Jesus. I suspect kind of in a mocking, kind of joking, sarcastic. He says, hey, look, I think I got a solution. There's this little kid over here that he's got 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. I don't think that's enough for the whole crowd, but it might be a start. If you can picture that scene, it's really something to think about how ridiculous this would be. Can I show you something? Here's an idea of what 5 loaves and 2 fish would look like. My cool Star Wars lunchbox. This is actually the real lunchbox that the boy had. Trust me. So here's 5 loaves right here, and here's 2 fishes. It's actually 2 cans of pickled herring is what it is. Now, if you can imagine this scene, this is what they have cobbled together. This is what 5 loaves and 2 fish look like. Can I show you what 16, 18, 20,000 people look like? Yeah, that's what 18 to 20,000 people look like. It's just a ridiculous scenario that somehow this is going to feed that group of people. Except for one thing, that Jesus already knew what he was going to do. He was going to imprint their minds with something that, as amazing as it might be to think that he could feed 16 to 20,000 people with that, that's not really the miracle here. That's not really what Jesus is trying to show. He's not trying to convince them that he has ability, though he puts his ability on full display in an amazing kind of way. He's after something else. Now, everybody would have kind of known how ridiculous it is, because when they arrived, there were no food trucks around. There were no wagons with bread around. There were no fish vendors. They're out in the wilderness in the middle of nothing. And somehow that's going to feed them all? Well, this is what Jesus does. In verse 10, it says he tells everyone to sit down. So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered, there's that number, 5,000 people, which by calculations, as I've already said, is probably someplace when you add women and children, you end up with 16, 18, 20,000 people, something like that. Why? By the way, side note, why does John record that there are 5,000 people? Maybe it's just coincidence. I don't think so. Maybe he's looking ahead, foreshadowing something. Interesting enough, 5,000 was the exact number of a Roman legion. And maybe John's looking ahead to what it is that Jesus is going to ultimately do, that he's going to defeat Rome and who they are, not with power and might of soldiers, but the power and might of grace and of generosity and the miracle of reproducing himself. It's an interesting thing that is what John includes. Verse 11 goes on to say this, then Jesus took the loaves and he gives thanks. If you can imagine this, these 5 barley loaves and 2 fish are in the hands of the one who was present when God spoke the world into existence. This is a poor family's meal. This is what the least of the least would have had to eat. And it's just this juxtaposed position and picture of the God of the whole universe who makes everything, holding in his hands a paltry little meal. And the first thing he can think to do is give thanks to his Father for what has been provided. It is amazing. But I guess if you can be thankful for the littlest of things and really be grateful to God for that, you're pretty much going to be thankful for everything. What a lesson from someone who made it all and still expresses his gratitude. So, after praying and saying thanks for it, it says that Jesus distributed them to the people, and afterward he did the same with the fish. And then get this, and they all ate as much as they wanted. In other words, not only did everyone get a bite, they got everything they wanted. Jesus gave them more than they asked for, and they got everything they wanted as well. They didn't just get a nibble or a morsel or a bite. They got a full stomach. I wonder, and I think there's maybe something in the text that suggests that this might be right, that this was a largely Jewish crowd, and I wonder if in that moment they didn't have kind of a deja vu feeling and a reminder of the time in their history when their people were wandering through the wilderness after Moses had freed them by God's power out of Pharaoh's control in Egypt. And what God did is he providentially gave them food every single morning. He gave them this substance that became known as manna, but every day it showed up for them. And I wonder if this wasn't a deja vu moment where they began to wonder, is it possible that this is our Moses? Is it possible that Jesus, with what he's just done, might be who we've been waiting for, who we were promised, our Messiah that's going to free us? The story goes on. After everyone was full, Jesus told his disciples, "Now gather the leftovers so that nothing is wasted." So they picked up the pieces and filled up 12 baskets with scraps left by the people who had eaten from the 5 barley loaves. More than they could eat, more than they started with. How divine is that? And now, the people, it seems, begin to settle into an idea. Something starts to take over their thinking. Who exactly are we dealing with here? Who is this person? Which, by the way, that is the greatest question you and I can ask in life. Who is Jesus? Who is he really? And so they begin to think about who this might be, and they've just seen something, they've heard something, they can't quite put the pieces together, and it causes them to ask this question. In verse 14 it says, when the people saw him do this miraculous sign, they exclaimed, "Surely he is a prophet, the prophet that we've been expecting. Maybe, just maybe, this is the one that we have been waiting for. Maybe he's our deliverer. Maybe he's our Messiah. Maybe he's our Moses. And this is our moment. Today is our day. Let's make him king because he can, together with 5,000 of us and all of the group that's here, we'll pick up more steam. Let's march on Jerusalem. Let's walk through the doors and the gates of the city, and let's declare Jesus king. This is our moment to be free like Moses brought us out." And when Jesus saw this, in verse 15, it says that they were ready to force him to be their king. He slipped away into the hills by himself. It's like Jesus says, "I am your king, but I'm not the kind of king that you think I am. You want me to be the king, the conqueror of the Romans, and that'll free you from tyrannical oppression. And I want to do that as well, but I want to do it differently than you think I want to do it differently than you think I should. I am a king. But I want you to know that there's a type of freedom I want to bring to you that's even greater than freedom from Roman oppression. I want to bring freedom to your souls. I want to bring freedom to your life. I want to bring to you the kind of freedom where you have a friendship with the God who made you, like a real friendship, not one that's birthed in fear or in trepidation or having to perform or having to do good things so he likes you or treats you really. I want to have a friendship with you. I'm that kind of king. I'm all powerful and I will free you, but it's going to shock you how I'm going to free you. I'm going to free you by giving my life for you. And that's a different kind of king. And so I'm going to step out of the picture right now, because if you think that this is who you want to make as king and the kind of king you want, I'm telling you, not now. It will happen, but it'll happen different than what you think. And as John tells the account a little further, as Jesus walks away, he appears to gather his guys and says, "Guys, go back to the other side, back home, back to the other side of the lake, and I'll meet you there. I want to take that time by myself." And so Jesus does that. There's an amazing story of Jesus' followers heading back by boat to the other side. And then the next day, the story picks up again. This group are back over on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. They're back home, and once again, a crowd searches to find Jesus. Has happened all the time. In John 6:25, we read it. They found him on the other side of the lake, and they asked, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Well, the truth is, that really wasn't the question they were asking. This isn't the real question, and Jesus knows something about him. So Jesus reveals to them what he has known all along, and this is the point, I think, of John's story. Jesus knows something about human beings and human natural kind of nature that he's now going to push on a little bit. In verse 25, Jesus replies after they ask him, so how did you get here? Here's your real question, he says. To tell you the truth, you want to be with me because I fed you. That's really why you want. It's like Jesus says, I know something about you. I know who you are. I know human beings. I know human nature. I know that in some point in our lives, and for some of us, all of our lives, we want Jesus, but we want him for what he might do for us, more than they simply want him for himself. Now, we would likely never, ever say that directly. We wouldn't maybe even recognize that's what we're doing. I know I wouldn't want to admit that. But the truth of my own life is I can think of times, even recently, where I really want Jesus to do something. I really want Jesus to protect our church from people getting COVID. I really want that. I really want to honor him well in our community by him doing something for us. I want him to, I could have quite a list. But often for us, we wouldn't say it just like that. I want Jesus for what you'll do. We say things like, I really don't go to church much anymore, and I kind of checked out on my life group because the truth is I wasn't getting much out of it. Or we'll say things like, I used to read my Bible, and then I kind of stopped because I wasn't getting much out of it. Or we'll say this, there were times where I gave financially and I was really generous and sacrificially gave, but I wasn't getting anything out of it, so I kind of stopped. Or a few months ago, I was praying and I was taking time to be alone with Jesus, but I wasn't getting anything out of it, or I wasn't getting out of it what I thought I'd get out of it, so I just kind of drifted away from it and stopped it. I had a friendship with Jesus when I was a kid, and then I grew up and I got a bit smarter and a bit more savvy, and I kind of left that behind because I wasn't getting anything out of it. You see, we won't say, Jesus, I want you for what you do for me, rather than you. We say it in those kinds of terms. Jesus, I'm not getting anything out of it. Like, you should be doing something for me. You should give me some experience. You should give me some help or healing or fix me. And that's really what I want you for. And I don't know if you've noticed this in your life, but I have in my life, that when I approach Jesus that way, and he graciously does what I ask him to do, it doesn't end up with me being a lot closer to him for a longer period of time. It does maybe for the immediate till the thankfulness disappears. And then I'm back to where I was. I want something more from him. I want him to do something. And then end up with this relationship of just asking him for what he can give me. And that's really not much of a friendship. What Jesus is about to tell them and us is that he understands that. He gets it. He's not okay with it because he wants something more, but he does get it. You see, as long as connecting with Jesus is about getting something out of it, we really don't know who it is. This is how Jesus says it in verse 26. He says, I tell you the truth. You want me because I fed you, not because you understand the miraculous signs. In other words, I get it. I know that you want me to heal you, fix you, feed you, provide for you, and I've invited you to do that. I've invited you to come. Ask me. It's okay. Ask me. I might even do things for you don't ask me to. It's kind of the kind, gracious God that I am. But I know this as well, Jesus might say. It is impossible to have a real, interactive, authentic, intimate friendship with someone that's based on what you can get from that person. It's just impossible. I don't think there's a condemning bone in Jesus' body when he says that. He's not saying, I wish you would stop asking me for stuff, or, man, it really bugs me when you come and ask me for that. No, he's not saying that at all. He's not. I think he's saying, keep asking. Keep asking, because I am good and gracious and kind, and I want the best for you, and I'll always do what's right. I'll always do what's good. I'll always be with you. But I want something more with you, and it's what you want too. You see, you don't want me just to do what you need or you want me for. I know you're made for me. You want me, and I want you, Jesus would say. And until we find that, it's not going to be the kind of friendship that it really is meant to be. You actually don't want me just to give you things to make things better. You want me to do all of life with you is really what you want. And you know something? That's exactly what Jesus wants as well. To live together. Every part of it. Every moment of it. Jesus has a name for that kind of life. You know what he calls it? He calls it eternal life. Now, this is how John remembers saying it. Because I know what you and I both want in the relationship, here is some foundational advice Jesus gives. Verse 27, but don't be so concerned about perishable things like food. Spend your energy seeking the eternal life. That is the Son of Man. That is what he can give you. See, eternal life isn't just about going to heaven when we die. It's that, but it's so much more than that. If you can imagine a life where God gets what he wants, which he often calls life in his kingdom, where he's the king and he's this immeasurably good, immeasurably generous and loving and truth-telling and gracious and faithful and benevolent and holy and patient and powerful king. And he says, you know, what I want is I want to live as that king in your life every single day, all the time. Not just when you need something, not just when you want something. I want that too, but I want to do this all the time. And when we find that, you're going to find that you get everything you need and more than you want. In another eyewitness account, Jesus almost pleads for us to seek his kingdom and his way, and everything else, it seems, will come your way as well. You see, but here's the struggle. The idea of wanting Jesus for what he can do for us, rather than just wanting him, is hard to give into. Even after seeing what Jesus did for them the day before, this group comes back to Jesus after he tries to explain what he really wants and what they really want. They said, well, show us one more thing you do. Give us one more magic trick, one more thing that you can do to convince us. How about some bread once again? To which Jesus says, he says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry again. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Can I say this rather directly? I hope we're not just connecting with Jesus for the bread, for lunch. I hope that we're connecting with him because he's the bread of life. You know, if we reduce Jesus to being a bread truck rather than the bread of life, we will miss out on the kind of life that he wants to give us. Does he want to answer our prayers and give us the good things that are good for us all the time? He'll always decide what's best and what's good. But he wants something more than that. He wants to do all of life with us, all of life, every bit of it. Would you be willing to take a step and move from just asking him for what you want and asking him to live this moment with you, and then the next moment to do all of life with him? It's really what he wants. And truth is, it's really what you and I want too. So now Jesus, you came into this world as God incarnate to show us what God the Father was really like. And it turns out, you're right, he's like you, and you're beautiful, and you're amazing, and you're smart, and you are caring and good and holy and right and just, and you have just simply offered us to do all of life with you, to live with you, to do every moment, to come and ask you for sure, to do great things for us. But most of all, the greatest thing we can ask you is, Jesus, would you come and do life with me? Would you do this next moment with me? The next decision, the next opportunity? Would you do all of life with me? And Jesus, I think you're right in what you say. We'll find everything we want and more than even that. And we'll thank you for it now, Jesus. Amen.